So hello and welcome to Celebrating Comics with Random House Graphic. My name is Greg Newton and I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division with my partner Donnie Jokum. And the Bureau, we like to say, is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. We're waiting for that to happen, or maybe we'll make it happen with your help because we need it. The Bureau is located inside the LGBT Community Center on West 13th Street, which sadly still remains closed. We are awaiting, they're hopefully going to be starting a phased in reopening in July, I'm told. So we'll be making a lot of noise once we are able to reopen. But in the meantime, we've been hosting events like this online, and you can catch past ones on our YouTube channel. I'll share that in the link later. And we also launched an online store. I'm going to briefly share screen and show you that, because that is where you can find books by our creators tonight, and they're 25% off for the remainder of the day. So if you just go to bgsqd.com/store and then you scroll down, you'll see right at the top of the featured products, Seance Tea Party by Reimena Yee, Suncatcher by Jose Pimienta, and Witchlight by Jessi Zabarsky. So please check those out, and that's a great way to support us and to support our authors and publisher. So I want to get this going. I did want to let you know that closed caption is on. If you would like to use that, you can turn that on. It's in the menu in the bottom of your screen. And if you want to ask a question, you can put that in the chat function. We're also a smallish group. It looks like there are 18 of us total, so I'm sure you can unmute yourself and ask, and that will be fine as well, but you can choose either. You've got options. So I'm going to turn it over to Whitney Leopard from Random House Graphic, who is going to be talking with our panelists and hosting this show. So please give it up. Put your hands visibly together for Whitney Leopard.
Thank you very much, Greg, and I'm very excited to be here. And I'm excited to be here with my authors who I love and adore, and it's always nice to see their faces because it's been so long. Like Greg said, my name is Whitney Leopard. I am the senior editor at Random House Graphic. We are, I don't even have to say new anymore. We are not a new imprint. We are an imprint of Random House children's books where we focus on graphic novels. We launched in 2020, as so many things happened in 2020, but we are alive and well. We have been putting out graphic novels for kids and young adults, and our goal is to have a graphic novel on every bookshelf, and we are continuing to work at that goal. And so I'm excited to be here with these creators, and I figure I am going to let everyone introduce themselves first. I'm going to assign an order so that makes it easier so you know when to introduce yourself. But if we could have it be Jessi, Reimena, and Jose. So Jessi, please introduce yourself. Let the audience know a little bit about you, any books that you've worked on, and anything else you want them to know.
Hi, I'm Jessi. I am the author of Witchlight from Random House Graphic. And I have another fantasy graphic novel coming out this December from Random House called Coming Back. Some folks have been confused whether it's a sequel to Witchlight. It's not, but I think you'll still like it. Similar approach, and I think has only gotten better. But I live in Chicago. I have too many plants and one round cat.
All right, over to you, Reimena.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reimena Yee. I'm a strange and fancy graphic novelist from Malaysia. and I'm the author and illustrator of Seance Tea Party. It's a middle grade coming of age graphic novel about girls, ghosts, and growing up. And I've also written and illustrated a historical fantasy Turkish vampire epic called The Carpet Merchant of Constantinia, and the most recent retelling of the Alexander Romance, which is a 2,000-year-old global literary tradition about the lives and legends and the many faces of Alexander the Great, which is currently ongoing as a webcomic.
All right, Jose, your turn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jose Pimienta. I am the author and illustrator for the graphic novel Suncatcher. I do not have an example on it. But yeah, my pronouns are they, them, and I currently live in Glendale, California, which is right outside of Los Angeles, or Los Angeles adjacent. For the year 2020, I worked on another book that will be coming out through Random House Graphic called Twin Cities. I'm very excited about it. And other than that, I love going on walks, and I drink coffee, and I love music. So again, I'm just very happy to be here. So I will also take the contest. The contest. I also have 2 cats. So.
I was ready for you to say you take long walks on the beach and just start going to your profile. So yeah, it's great to have all 3 of you, and I'm excited to get to talk to you, about your stories and graphic novels. But before we start, it is Pride Month. So I was curious if you had a favorite LGBTQ graphic novel that you would like to recommend for our readers before we get into the conversations.
I can go first again. I've recommended before and still recommend The Breakaways by Kathy G. Johnson, who, full disclosure, is a friend of mine. But it's just a wonderful middle grade graphic novel about girls on a really inept soccer team. And I have like so little interest in sports, but I still love this book so much. Like, I read it all in one sitting and just cried, and was it folds in queer content with all of the other things that are going on with the characters so seamlessly and naturally, and lets the child characters deal with what they're going through, like with each other, in a really lovely and just natural way, and highly recommend.
Okay, it's not that I do not have a clear recommendation, but it's very early in the morning, and I'm not very good at this kind of question on the spot. So I'm just going to pass the question on to Jose.
Fair enough. Do we just get one, or can we say multiple books?
You can say multiple books.
Okay, so yes, The Magic Fish is wonderful. As the Crow Flies is an amazing book. I tell everyone I meet who tells me that they like comics that they should read Kiss Number 8. That book broke me to tears. I highly recommend it. I'll keep it for there for now. I still recommend Skim to a lot of people, because that book was it's just so gorgeous. It's so good. And I'm pretty sure I could keep going, but
we'll stop you there so that you don't just keep listing all the books.
Right.
But that's many great recommendations. Yeah, so thank you all. And so each of you have very different stories between Suncatcher and Witchlight and Seance Tea Party, whether it's about a kid who wants to stay a kid to young women who are figuring out where they fit in the world. Do you find yourselves drawn to identity stories, or is that something that just kind of happens with the stories that you're telling?
If we're going in the same order. Is that,
yeah, you can do that.
Personally, I think when I'm writing, I'm not actively thinking about identity per se. I think what I start with is just like difficult feelings. I think a lot of what I'm drawn to is the messiness inside of a person, and drawing that out and figuring how it works, and how it clashes or meshes with somebody else's messy feelings, and representing that literally or metaphorically in the fantasy world. And so it's a lot, it's very loosey-goosey. It's like identity is definitely in there, but it's like a big old mush pile with a bunch of stuff.
I love that. Reimena, do you have?
Just like Jessie, I don't consciously work on like stories about identity. Personally, I prefer like stories that focus around the team, or it's like something that's very like high concept. But if my stories happen to include identity, they are usually either incidental or like an important aspect which informs character's backstory, or like their response to a situation, or maybe even the world building, but never actually like something on which a plot or a conflict centers around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I'll be the contrarian on this one, because I do think about it that way, and identity is a really good way to similar to but very similar to what Reimena and Jessie were saying, is that identity is like a really good way to to give a structure to internal struggles, and I do tend to gravitate to those types of stories myself as an audience, or as a fan of comics or any other media. So yeah, to me, when it comes into designing or writing a story, like I do tend to look a lot into, well, what is this character's internal struggle, and what are they trying to what are they trying to accomplish, or where they're going, and usually there is like traces of personal stuff that kind of goes in there, but also I do try to separate between the fictional characters and whatever it is that I'm going through myself. But no, I do think that a character's identity is something that I do tend to gravitate towards, both stories that I like and also stories that I like to work on, because comics take a while. So it's so yeah, that's how I look at it.
No, I definitely agree with everything all three of you have said. I'm going to throw a question out there that was not a question I sent you beforehand, so now I'm apologizing because I'm asking you something that I did not send. But comics do take a while. This should not be a surprise to anyone here, but comics take a while. And while you're working on them, do you find yourselves, if maybe you didn't necessarily have, like, you're not necessarily pouring your personal story into it, does the story become personal to you while you're working on it, even if it's not necessarily a story about yourself?
I would say that has been a big part of my process that I've recognized over the last several years, of not even intentionally, but just as a thing that happens, that I will be working on something, and 3/4 of the way through look back on it and go like, oh, that's what I was going through 2 years ago. and just this, it's a very long, time intensive, work intensive therapy session. That hopefully is also entertaining to people. But yeah, I think a lot of what keeps me going on it is being in love with the fictional characters and giving myself challenges and stuff. And then the happy accident is the, oh, there's me. I'm in there.
So yeah, comics do take a while, and because I recognize this, the kinds of stories that I usually take on as a graphic novel, they have to be like concepts and ideas that I'm serious on and that I'm passionate about, you know, so that, you know, and I'm just like, I need to feel this urge to want to write it, to draw it. And it needs to be like strong and serious enough for it to be able to sustain itself through the process of creation, which is quite intense. So I don't think, and it's kind of weird because it's like, I do not think stories that I work on are always necessarily personal, but I guess there are stories that I strongly feel for. And so that is what I think anyway, when it comes to what kinds of stories that I pick for this super long, super intense process.
Yeah, I mean, like while working on something, yeah, I've made phone calls and written emails to people that I was just like, hey, that thing, sorry about that. I've thought it over. I've been thinking about it. But yeah, no, it's yeah, because it does take because it takes a long time. It does kind of, for me, it's been almost like a process of just working out. Like it's like an additional step to therapy. Go to therapy if you can, people. But no, yeah, for sure, it definitely, for me, definitely has been like a moment of, it didn't initiate as something that is like, oh, I'm going to talk about my point of view on this. I'm talking about a fictional character, but then it very quickly turns into, oh yeah, I need to, that's interesting. Yeah, for sure, that does happen.
I love all of you. So it is, so, you know, in your stories, you each have various themes and characters in your story that a lot of people in the LGBTQ community can connect with. And so I was curious about, when you look at your stories, do you think of them as LGBTQ stories, or how do you think of these stories as you're working on them? Like, do you consider them based off of who you think will read them, or do you think about them in a different way as you're working on them?
For me, I think of my stories as fantasy stories first. Um, and then it's just, I write about the kind of people that I'm interested in and connect with, and, you know, or who just like pop into my head. And, you know, sometimes that changes over the course of making a book, but I think I start thinking about audience kind of like almost in the thumbnail stage, because then it's like, okay, it's less content and more, how do I communicate to this kind of person best? And other than that, it's like you can make a fantasy story about women figuring themselves out and going on adventures for any age group or gender or any sort of person in the whole world. And I just make it for me.
So I think of my stories as my stories, in the sense that they are written by me and I happen to be part of the LGBTQ community. I see my writing and drawing the same way a crafts person does, you know, like cutting away the excess marble to reveal like the stone's desired shape. And that requires thought and delicate consciousness and like knowing how your existence connects to the tool which constructs the object, which is then like perceived by an audience who lives in the world just the same as you do. So like when I create for this world, which is like diverse and large and beautiful. And that means being inclusive to whoever will find most joy or comfort or catharsis, okay, in whatever I make, regardless of who they are and like where they come from.
I guess I would say that I think about it a lot. And I don't know how hoity-toity or almost it may come across as if I'm dodging the question, but because I'm also one of those people that while I'm working and writing characters, like we're all friends now. I talk to my characters in order to figure out like what my character is going through or what are their perspectives and what have you. So it's almost as if like when I'm writing them, I'm allowing them to also speak to me. But because I'm also focused on a narrative, I try to keep it like within the confines of like whatever the arc is. But I do think about some, things like that in terms of like their about my characters' identities and where they are themselves. And sometimes I get there, sometimes I don't. For example, specifically with Suncatcher, I mean, I don't know how this may come across, but like there were times where I were considering like, well, what would be Beatrix's identity and in this sense. And I almost thought as the biggest answer that I kind of gave myself is like, well, she's 17. Why don't you let her, like, what are you asking her that for? Like, it's like, so whatever that is, we'll think about it later. But then of course, I'm, basing Beatrix out of like a mixed match of a couple of people that I know, myself included. So I guess I'll just leave that hanging, whatever that, because I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, like I think about it, but I'm not always entirely sure if the story that I'm writing requires to be either explicit or specific about that. So I hope that doesn't come across a little wishy-washy, but I think that's about as honest as I can be at the moment about that.
I feel like you answered the question. You just answered the question for your own experience, so you're totally fine. Now I have a few more questions, but I wanted to let the audience know that if y'all have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I will open the floor for a Q&A later if you'd like to ask your question out loud. But I just wanted to let everyone know if they have something they would like to ask, feel free to put it in the chat. All right, so you all know that you have amazing stories. How do you know you have amazing stories? Because I have them on my desk right beside me, and I think that is a good enough reason. But you have these amazing stories that you not only wrote, but you drew, because these are graphic novels. And we've already talked that graphic novels take a long time to get made. But what made you choose to make these stories as graphic novels? Was there something about the graphic novel format that you felt was essential for telling these stories, or was there something that drew you to doing it as a comic versus writing it as something else?
I think for me, I think like early middle school, so maybe like 10 or 11 years old, I started getting really into comics, starting with like, whatever manga and like superhero compilations the library had, and newspaper comics and web comics big time. And that all happened very quickly for me because I think the specifics of the medium really click with how my brain works, I think. I think that I tend to read things visually when interacting with people, that I pay a lot of attention to body language and facial expressions and, you know, tension and all of these very subtle things that you can capture easily in a drawing, but it'll take you a long time to explain them in prose or another medium that's, you know, I couldn't do on my own, you know, so it'd be hard for me to make films. And I think it's just like a very, for me, economical way of making stories, both art process wise and ability wise.
So I actually began telling stories through comics as a very young kid, but for a brief period during my preteens, I really wanted to be a novelist since most of my reading was in prose. I actually rarely read comics outside of newspaper cartoons like Garfield or Archie Digest. So for a while, I thought comics were like no longer suited for the suddenly big, ambitious stories that I dreamt of making. And then two things changed my mind. The first was realizing that all my stories rely heavily on imagery, kind of just like what Jessi said about body language and emotions and all that. And the second thing was discovering webcomics, which proved that the language of comics was big enough and flexible enough to say everything I wanted to say and more. So at 14, I immediately returned to comics and sharpened my skills and read more comics and graphic novels. And that has been my primary mode of storytelling ever since.
Yeah, very similar to both as well. Like it's, I mean, I think we can all wave the banner that comics are literature, and I think that we, you know, in this case, like the four of us are interested in, you know, in storytelling overall. And on a similar level, I was always interested in drawing, and I was always interested in telling stories. But I was also one of those kids who was growing up during a time when when we were being told that, you know, comics are not real books, or that cartoons were, you know, were just for kids, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the like serious books are these long, you know, long-winded prose, the classics, and so on. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that necessarily. But I think eventually I kind of figured out that that because comics, you know, has its own visual language and its own visual motifs and whatnot, that I could utilize that, because writing is very difficult, and languages are complicated. But you know, it's yeah, like through drawing, it just kind of seemed to make sense that I was able to communicate, or I was able to convey um, a clearer idea of whatever I was thinking of, whether it was a concept or a story, or you know, as they mentioned before, like a, you know, either an expression or, you know, it's like some kind of imagery, you know, as opposed to having to describe it. And so yeah, I mean, it made sense. I remember falling in love with the medium around a similar time, like around maybe 10, 11-ish, maybe 12, like once I discovered like, oh, these can be like long forms. It's not just the newspaper ones on, you know, like it's more than that. So and ever since it's been like, well, let's utilize this. Look where we are now.
It's true though. Look where we are. Well, kind of going on that, do you feel like the graphic novel landscape has changed over the years and been more open to different type of stories? And to kind of follow up that question, because I feel like they go hand in hand, is what kind of stories would you like to see in the future when it comes to graphic novels out in the world? Like, what book do you wish was already on the shelf, or what book do you wish? And it can't be one that you worked on that it just hasn't come out yet. Like, what book do you wish was on the shelf yesterday, or what book do you feel like you would love to see in the next few years?
First off, yeah, definitely. I think it would be hard to deny that the graphic novel selection has, widened and, gotten a lot more variety over the last few years. I think there's been kind of a collective awakening in the industry of just like catching up a little bit to what young people have been interested in for a long time. That I think web comics have been filling that niche, and have been wildly popular. So many people are doing so much amazing work and just giving it away for free online, and people are using that kind of format to really improve and become excellent storytellers. And I think having that kind of variety just like already laid out, it makes it easy to see like, oh, people are already making this stuff. It already is popular. It's already amazing. Like, let's just scoop it up. Scoop it up and put it on the shelf. Oh, and then as far as what I'd like to see, specific soapbox for me is I would really love if the American market embraced black and white art a little bit more. Even as I say that, I'm getting like way more into color in my own work, but like it's still something that I really love in manga and a lot of webcomics, that just there is a specific kind of beauty and texture that you only get with the absence of color. And it's also easier and quicker to produce. And just I think we're already on such a wonderful upswing of variety and different kinds of content, and I'd like to see different looks and media explored more too.
I'm rooted to that comics, so for me, the comics landscape by itself, the creators and indie publishers, they have always been open to different types of stories from the get-go. It's the traditional publishing ecosystem, the people with the money and the infrastructure, particularly in North America, who have finally caught up. But what has changed globally, I think, is the kinds of people who are making comics now. It's more diverse, and the increased access to mainstream readers, not just the niche ones in the specialized comic stores or the internet bubbles. But personally, I still don't feel that we have reached the point where we are being truly inclusive of creators and truly accessible to potential audiences, given that the North American boom is still localized to middle grade, and that internally publishing is still biased towards a certain cultural demographic. But in the future, that I hope to see more creators tell whatever stories they want to whatever audience suits those stories most, and to be given like a fair amount of support for it, and not be asked to dilute for consumption's sake. For me personally, I would like to see more historical comics, especially like retellings of legends and folklore and other like popular literature from other countries and other cultures. So that'd be great.
I just want to recognize what they both said, because I agree with 100% with everything that they both said. So let's see if I can add anything to that. Yeah, I do think that for the positive, there has been more recognition for certain creators in the past 10 years in comics. I think it's a good thing. I think we can still keep doing better. But yes, things have changed. Things have, things have improved, and there's still a lot of work to do for sure. I mean, yeah. So in that sense, I think that's more of like a call to action to all of us to continue to, keep recognizing different, different types of storytellings that have not had the space yet, and how to keep pushing them in that direction in order for them to, gain, the visibility that they deserve. So yeah, I mean, like I'm optimistic for the future, for sure. But like many creatures of the wild, like just a little hesitant. As far as things that I would like to see on shelves, both examples are great, and yes, I do agree with, and I agree with both of those. I think that if I, the only, one that I would like to see is I would also like to see an embrace in the mainstream market of both things that are a little bit more on the genre side, but also things that are more on the experimental side. Like I would like for there to be like a little bit more of like a wider space for experimental storytelling, or experimenting with the format, or, like, I know that for obvious reasons, and I'm not to be coy, but like, making a book takes a long time, but also printing a book is very expensive, especially in color. So I can understand why it's more like, no, we cannot print a book that opens like an accordion for 300 pages. Like we can't do that. But it'd be really cool if there was a market for that, like, or just, that's just one example, but like, those are the kind of things that I wish that there could, for soon, be more of a, a more acceptable space, rather than just in a few indie, indie spots. That still, it's awesome that we have them, and it's awesome that there's a lot of creators that are pushing for the form of comics to try new things. But like I think that they should also have a little bit of a stand in the mainstream area. That's my nugget.
For the last time, Jose, we're not going to print your 300-page accordion comic, okay? No, I'm just kidding.
This was my opportunity. Like, I was just about to launch the Kickstarter. No, I'm kidding.
Well then, so I only have one last question that I've prepared, but I can always come up with more if the audience have any. And it's not really a question as much as, usually at the end of panels, whenever I work with people, especially whenever we're at conventions, I go like, okay, now it's a time to do a shameless plug. Is there something you are working on? Is there something that you would like to tell people about, even if it's something you're not working on, that you would like people to know about or be aware of, so that they can find out other things that you're working on? One plug, I'm going to plug a webcomic, which is called This Is Not Fiction. And it's a webcomic that I've been reading for years. That I find amazing, by the creator Nikki Mamino, that I really think everyone should check out. It's a webcomic, it's free, like, go read it. But yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Jessi. Shameless plug time. What would you like people to support you in?
Like I said earlier, I do have another book coming out this December called Coming Back. It's a weird fantasy story about two young women who are in a partnership and have semi-conflicting desires and visions for their future, and have to kind of reconcile with stuff inside of themselves and in their community and in their relationship. And also there's just a bunch of weird goopy monsters and stuff. Um, Other than that, you can find me online. If you just Google my last name, I'm the only Zabarsky out there. There are actually a lot of Zabarskys, but they are not on the internet. They're just related to me. Other than that, let's see here. Pick up a comic book, go to your local library. Yeah, one of the things I'm most excited about with Chicago opening back up is I'm going to go to my library graphic novels section soon and just be like, for me.
So you can find me through my name. I'm the only person in the entire world with my name. So it's not going to be very difficult to find. And as I mentioned up top, I have a webcomic that I just launched like last week, which is that Alexander the Great retelling. It's called Alexander the Servant and the Water Alive, and it's basically just like 21st century retelling of the Alexander romance. So it's a 2,000-year-old literary tradition about the life and legends of Alexander the Great, and it's going to be very sad and it's going to be quite queer in some ways. So, and it's also experimental in regards to the comics form, because I have taken inspiration from illuminated manuscripts and other book-related arts. So it's going to be very interesting to see like how that plays out. But yeah, and other than that, just buy Jessi and Jose and my books from the store, and support whoever else that you would like to support, because you know that's how you can get more stories that you like.
Can I plug in multiple things, or can we?
You can plug in two things, and then if you have more time, I will let you plug more.
All right, great. Well,
you'll be the closeout. We'll just let you sit there and talk as everyone.
Oh gosh, that's don't do like this will never end. It's talk a lot. Okay, so I would like I guess I'm gonna go with like plugging in the things that I'm involved in. I think that makes more sense. Coming this in September, I have a book with Iron Circus Comics that I illustrated and that Kel McDonald wrote. So Stars Hide Your Fire, written and colored and lettered by Kel McDonald, and I did some of the pictures. That comes out later this year. Also, Dark Horse is making a second edition to a book called Soupy Leaves Home that was written by Cecil Castellucci, and again, I got to write it. First comic I ever colored, if anybody wants to take that piece of trivia. Next year, Twin Cities through Random House Graphic comes out, and other than that, Graphic Novel TK is an amazing podcast. You should listen to that, and get all the books that are here. It's Sam's Tea Party is amazing. Witchlight is fantastic. So yeah, read more comics.
That was way more than two, Jose. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, if you kind of stack them, you know.
Yeah, it totally works. All right, we have some questions in the chat. So I'm going to start off. Do you find yourself gravitating towards telling stories for certain age groups, such as middle grade, YA, chapter book? Or are there age groups that you'd like to move into that you haven't, or any age groups that you do not connect to at all?
I think I tend to just write what interests me and trust the audience to either just like it or not like it, kind of. I think growing up and still currently, I did not really have very much regard for like, oh, this is for this age group, or this is for your age group. Something, like I was reading books that were supposedly for, much older readers when I was like 7 or something. And at the same time, like I have a bookshelf over there that's full of picture books, which is another soapbox of mine. Everyone should still be reading picture books. They're basically comics with different ratios. And there's so much wonderful talent. So yeah, I think I just try to present interesting and compelling stories in a way that's clear and interesting. And if somebody bounces off of it, then I hope it's because it's not for them and not that I didn't communicate clearly.
I've got to agree 100% with Jessi. So I don't think I have anything else that I would like to add.
I'll be the difference of opinion. No, okay. Just for the sake of it. No, I mean, I do think about that, but like I think I mentioned earlier, because I tend to gravitate towards coming of age stories particularly, and those tend to, for some reason, like coming of age tends to fall under like particular blocks in a person's life. So for the same reason that I am drawn to middle grade books where someone is coming of age around the age of 11, 12, maybe 13 and entering into teenage angst or anything else that is happening around that time. I think like it kind of tends to make that. Same thing with YA, where characters are usually like exiting a particular part of their life and they're coming into terms with like something else that's going on. But that similar lens I can apply to whenever I work with, whenever I try to write or work with stories that are about someone entering their quarter life crisis. And I'm guessing everyone here knows what I'm talking about, or something along those lines. So yeah, I mean, because I'm interested in those types of stories of someone going through a particular set in life. Yeah, middle grade and YA tend to lend themselves very much to that. So I'd be lying if I say that I don't try to make an effort to make it fit a particular demographic, but that also comes with, making books a little bit and just like trying to know like what the audience might be tuned into, or, or what, something that the audience may respond to, and just taking that into consideration, because I do like, anyway. So yeah, it's I think about it, but I don't want to claim a set opinion carved in stone, but
it's definitely something your editor thinks about. I promise you.
I definitely remember early on and coming back that you were like, how old are these characters exactly? Because we want to be sure. And I was like, I don't know.
I can work with ambiguous when it comes to YA. All right, we can make ambiguous work. Yeah. So next question: do you prefer to start with a script or art? Is there any part of the process of creating graphic novels that you find challenging? And if yes, how do you approach it?
So I start with a notes app document on my phone that I just puke a bunch of like, here I've got a full idea for a scene, or I've got a couple of lines, or man, I really like this kind of art, or this kind of creature from this folktale is cool, or I like this pattern on these pants. And just kind of like, that's my starting point, is just a pile of things that will eventually coalesce. And even before that, it's just kind of stuff that floats around in my head in the shower and while I'm trying to fall asleep. And fitting those things together is fun, I think. I think the most like actively challenging part of it is probably thumbnailing, because there's so much to hold in your head at the same time. And I'm actively trying the last few projects to figure out more in the thumbnails, and not kick the can down the road to future me so much, and not just, write montage on 5 pages and leave it up to later to figure out what exactly that is. And there's certain things that I do to like give myself a little bit of a handicap there, but it's definitely a little bit of 3-dimensional chess. I love and believe in the potential of comics to do so many of these things at the same time. And I want to do all of those things as well as I can, but it's hard. And then, as we've been saying, a always forever difficult thing is just getting the thing done, because it takes so long. Just like getting through all of the pencils and all of the inks and etc.
So I think my most concrete starting point would be an outline, and then it would be a script. But usually in between those, I spend like big portions of time just thinking about it in my head and trying to flesh things out, trying to make sure that the characters and story and the art direction, they all make sense thematically. And I actually put in a lot of effort to like have a full story, like a full script, before I even start thumbnailing, because of how intense my drawing process is and how dependent my layouts are on the pacing of the story itself. So yeah, so that's where I start. And the most challenging part of the process is obviously like maybe starting it, and then after that like finishing it. That's difficult. But for me, I usually work pretty fast in general. So I would think that my most challenging part of the process would be the one that takes me the longest, which is usually the sketch part or the inking part sometimes. But everything else is like, okay, cool.
Yeah, for me, like it's I usually start crying, and then no, I'm kidding. No, it's very similar to prior answers. To me, it starts with just like a bunch of notes, or I think like the biggest one is that I just start throwing a lot of things into like not my phone, but like actually like a Word document or like a notepad, where it's just like I just write something down, and until eventually I land on something that I would be comfortable. Like if I can define like a bit of a concept or just like an idea or enough of like a setup, and then try to figure out if that is worth spending the next 2 to 3 years on a comic. Like that's, and and there are some things like, oh, that seems like a cool idea. Yeah, but I don't see a whole book out of that. And then, and again, just to throw another plug in, like Suncatcher just started with the excuse that I wanted to draw electric guitars and write about music and why I like music so much. Little did I know. But yeah, I think that once I kind of figure out a good concept, or a concept that I'm comfortable enough with, that I would like to explore, I just take it from there. And then after that, yeah, it's similar. Like I drew an outline, and then from the outline I try to make a full script, and then I go into thumbnailing and pencils. And I'm also the type of person that in each stage, I'm doing a particular type of writing in and of itself. To the degree that like I may be like even editing some dialogue even while I'm lettering the comic, which sometimes comes around the same time or a little before the coloring. So I like to keep the options open in that sense, but yeah, as a starting point, I do just like to think about it, like, okay, well, what am I trying to get at? Like, what am I going with this, rather than just, this sounds like an epic story. Yeah, but no, how about the story of like that one kid who encounters a weird thing in the middle of their block, and I was like, that's okay. That's anyways.
Yeah, I think that's great. All right, so for the sake of time, I'm going to assign you each a question. You're not all going to answer questions. I'm just going to assign questions to you to make sure that we can get to all these, because it is 8 o'clock. Well, after 8 o'clock now, so I want to make sure we respect everyone's time who's here. All right, so Jessi, you first, because that's the order we've been going all night. Do you have any tips for creators trying to figure out how to get started on a graphic novel or even a webcomic?
I think it's okay to do whatever feels easiest first sometimes. Like something that, sometimes what I'll do if I'm like really dragging my feet on pencils is just go through and draw a bunch of the like talking heads. But it's just like, okay, I can just like knock these out. And it's like, they have to be done anyways. So just do them. And maybe after you do that, you'll feel better about drawing all the buildings. From like really tiny, a lot of people have the advice of like, start small, don't try to, tackle your magnum opus, right out the gate. And I think that can help in a lot of instances if depending on what you're struggling with. If you're intimidated, you're feeling overwhelmed, you don't feel like you're good enough to do that story yet. Maybe do some hourly comics or some little, once a week journal comics, or start, do a 4-panel webcomic strip once a month, whatever, set the bar low for yourself and then achieve it and feel good. But if it's like, I have this grand idea and I can't stop thinking about it and I just want to do it and everybody's telling me I shouldn't do it, just do it. It's okay, you're allowed. And, just remember that even if you're the most amazing artist and writer in the world, it's not going to come out on the page exactly how you have it in your head, because they're just different mediums. It's like expecting the movie version of a comic to be exactly the same. It's not going to happen. So like, let that process happen and know that you will have another big idea and you'll be even better. So there's my weird advice.
Thank you. All right, Reimena, I want to ask you, what's your favorite part of your process? Is it particularly difficult, easy, or engaging?
Well, my favorite part of the process is coloring, because that's the easiest and the fastest and most intuitive thing for me to do. I don't even have to think about the palettes. I just dump the colors and go, which is fun. I think my second favorite process would be like thinking about the art direction of the comic. So like gathering references, doing the research, reading other books, that kind of thing. That's fun because again, I don't have to think so much about the process. It's just absorbing the influences like a sponge, and just hoping that what I create will do justice and will honor those inspirations.
I love that. All right, Jose, have you ever received a piece of feedback that really surprised you, whether during the art process or editing or from an audience?
A piece of what?
Feedback.
Oh yeah, of course. Plenty of times. And that's where I leave that. No,
Yeah, you're like all feedback. All feedback surprises you.
No, yeah, it's every day is like a birthday present. No, like it's a yeah, like I have, and I think of it. I mean, you're right here, Whitney. So yeah, I try to stay open just because I think it's important to both grow as a writer and an artist, to be open to feedback and listen and listen to constructive criticism, as well as ask more questions about what that feedback means and whether or not it's best suited for what you're trying to accomplish. And again, like I've received a lot of feedback. I've received feedback from people I respect, people I don't respect, or people that I look up to, or people that are just casual friends. And some of them are very helpful, and some of them have made my work for the better. But then there's also opinions and feedback that I receive that I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's really the tone that I'm going for. So I respectfully decline, but I appreciate you sharing the opinion because that's how egotistical I can be, I guess. Yeah, no, it's there has been a lot of feedback that at some point just blows my mind. Like, why didn't I think of that? That's brilliant. I'm gonna keep it, and it makes the story way better. So, yeah. So
that's great. All right, so last question, and then we're done for the night. And this will be for all of you. How important do you think art school is for success?
I don't think it's essential. I went to Bowling Green University in Ohio, and it is not a particular art school. I chose it because they had a digital art program at all, and there were trees on campus, and I was coming from a very rural area, and I was scared of cities. But the things that actually really helped me in that experience wasn't really the college setting. It was that I happened to be there for the exact 4 years where there was a comics club, and being around those other people and the couple of professors. We had a professor that was very interested in comics, and another professor who is a children's book author. And the two of them were heavily involved in the club, and just that group of people really pushed me to improve my drawing and my storytelling and think bigger about what I wanted to be able to do. And just got me used to going to shows, and a lot of those people were who I would table with at first, that we'd cram 6 people behind one table, so we only had to pay like $10 a piece, and all had our little sliver. And it was a lot more of the social aspects and the impetus to keep trying harder. And if you can find or make a community like that for yourself without paying thousands of dollars, then highly recommend. And I had heavy scholarships, but still it would those are the kind of things that I think are a benefit to going to college. And if you don't have access to those other things in an alternate route, then maybe college would be good for you.
I've actually never been to art school. I'm completely self-taught, and I went to college for a science degree, so it's totally different than what I'm doing now. But I recognize that art school, if it's not super expensive, it can be like important for some people who require like structure or like just like an idea of where to start. And I think the most important thing about art school is like being able to find people who share the same interests as you, or who are in the same like career path or like growth path as you are, and that it's always fun to grow together with your peers. So that's nice. But at the same time, I don't think it's completely necessary either, because we have the internet, and there's like more of there are more resources online now than ever before. So it's actually quite like easy or accessible, I guess, to be able to learn these skills by yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with both those answers, and let's see if I can add to it. I mean, first, I just want to recognize that that's like a really big question, and it's a constant conversation. But you know, let's get some people angry on Twitter right now. I think that whenever it gets to that part of like, whenever it gets to that part of the question, I think what a lot of people are asking is, you know, it's more than art school, art education. I think is very important, and you know, like whatever you can do to continue your artistic education, whether it's self-taught, a different college or art school or what have you, or through a community, then more power to you. That's, you know, like I think that that's a better way to go. But similar, you know, just echoing what echoing what you know, what Reimena said is that you know, like it's, you know, sometimes you go to school for a completely different thing, but it also happens that you're also friends with other people who are into the arts, and that can also help you. Or as Jessi was saying, sometimes you go into a completely different school and you just fall into comics because there was that community side to it, and then you flourish. So I happen to be one of those people that I thrive a little better inside a classroom. So I don't think that I would have done it very well had I been left to my own devices. But also in art school, in the art school that I went to is where I met several colleagues and peers that I'm still very close friends with. And I, you know, and I think that I've developed for the better because of them. So, you know, depends on how you want to take that, but I also recognize that that accessibility is not available to everyone, which you know, it's checking that privilege box, I guess. So so yeah, I mean, if you find out that art school can help you, by all means, you know, sure, but there are other ways to do it, and there are other ways to go around. But yeah, I do think that more than art school, I think art education is very important in order to flourish as, well, an artist. So yeah.
If I can say one more thing, building off of what they said, I think that's a really good point about just art education in general. I was very lucky with where I went to school for public school, that we had, you know, art classes every week, and my parents are creative people, and so they put me in like weekend art classes whenever I wanted to, and like I was extremely creatively privileged, I think. But like if you are someone who, you know, increasingly America keeps cutting art classes out of public schools because it's the first thing to go with funding. You know, if you don't really know how you do in an art classroom, like it might be worth it before you commit to college to just like take a weekend art class and just see how it goes. You know, see how it feels, or does it feel better to just be like, I'm just gonna sit in my living room and do stuff by myself? Because I think all of us kind of, the consensus is it's less about like college as a, you know, yes, no, black, white kind of answer, and more about who are you as a person and what can you get out of it. And you need to know who you are and what you can get out of it.
I agree with all of you. I want to thank the three of you so much for doing this panel. It has been a pleasure talking to you tonight. I want to thank our audience for coming in and joining and asking such amazing questions. And then I would like to thank Greg for hosting, and I will pass it off to you in case you have anything you want to say as we close out.
Thank you so much, Whitney. And thank you, Reimena, Jessi, and Jose. I just put in the chat a link to our upcoming events. Because it is Pride, we have an event every night this week. Yay! So yeah, please check that out. Also, as I put in the links earlier in the chat, we have books by Reimena, Jessi, and Jose that are on sale until midnight tonight. Truthfully, probably sometime tomorrow because I'm not staying up to midnight to take it off. So please check those out, and please support us by buying books from us. We really appreciate that. And I can't wait till we're back in person and we can host events with people live in the same room. But it's really great that this allowed us to connect with our participants from Malaysia, Chicago, and LA. So there you go. So I hope you have a lovely night, and I hope I'll see y'all soon. Much love.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.